Come on, y'all. Let's go on a journey to the table.
If we're going to do a dye day or something like that.
Yeah, we should.
I think that's it. I hadn't ever seen that May Meeting.
Oh, this is prepared for that. Okay, what do you want to show me? Oh, look, Alaska. Come here. Look at what they did on their artist board. You can't touch it. Isn't that really cool? Wow.
Oh, wow. It's so fun. Oh, this is for our YouTube.
Go ahead and select any one was dyed. And the girl with the red. You just you're not even, I'm on Facebook too. Are you on Facebook?
Oh, nice.
No, I'm not on that. So anyway, that girl that you just saw, who are you? You are, go ahead and tell me, is it Jen on Facebook? Oh, you're still sending.
Now I finished. Okay, now you want
Your Facebook me?
it should come in your text. As I just sent you. That's my
Okay, hello everybody. Would you take your seat, please? We're just about to begin.
Get your mic up. Yeah. I see that, but I'm on the link that I sent out in the email.
Oh, okay. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
So
Here, let me get you on here. And then just pass that on to the next speaker. Great.
I'll give
We
you.
can. We'll do. Whoa, we're up.
Okay, well, it is May. The rain is starting. And finally, we're going to see some mushrooms out there. Now, this has been a busy month already. We have had the Kelly Point Mycoblitz. We have had a cultivation group for shiitake and hericium. And we've had, what else did we have? The spring myco camp. And more, on and on. So you're going to start seeing some field trips posted. I guess the first thing I want to tell you about is that there is a new field trip reservation system, and we just introduced it on Wednesday. So at this point, our field trip leaders are thinking about where they want to go and when they want to host. As soon as the field trips start getting posted, you'll be getting emails that direct you to a location on the OMS website where you can actually sign up for those field trips. And I think actually the season's probably running a little bit late, so you haven't missed anything yet. At least I haven't. As far as I've seen, well, for example, at the Myco camp that happened just this past weekend, Brent Cartier and Mike, I forgot his last name, did a fabulous job in Settle Lake, as always. And Dr. Beug was our camp mycologist. He was fabulous. He found some mushrooms that he believes are so far unnamed, and hopefully we'll get the DNA back to confirm that. There's a beautiful yellow Cantharellus back there. Everybody see that? There's another yellow Suillus, also a very unusual mushroom. Some of those Ramaria are unique, perhaps a unique species. We're going to need DNA for those. But another thing that happened during the myco camp was a demonstration of dye making. And Janet Hepler did that, and I was just so impressed because she had over a dozen different colors. There's Janet right there. She had over a dozen different colors of yarn from real basic ingredients. So between the metals and the organic mushroom dyes, it was a very impressive demo. And then Brent went and made, he's a chef, by the way, and he made some stuffed potatoes with some of the Spring Kings and some cremini. Those were quite delicious, and he had some duxelles. So we got a great demonstration there. And then, of course, Michael's presentations were fabulous, as you're about to find out. So we're very honored to have him here tonight. Now, you probably know from the last few meetings that we've had that I like to make videos. And so I'm going to start off with just a couple of videos to highlight the things that have already come and gone, and maybe get you excited about the upcoming events for the month of late May and June. And of course, that was Kayla and Kat and Leah that organized and delivered that event. So thank you very much. It was really well done. And it was dry, bone dry. And you saw the morels were better out on Kelly Point than they were up in the Sisters area. So go figure. Next year, for sure, I'm going to be out there in March for the Verpas, end of March for the morels. And now I have a much better idea of where to look. So those were big morels. Okay, we have, oh, stop that. We have one more. Okay, David Featherstone is here. David, raise your hand wherever you are. There he is. He was kind enough to take us on a tour of Mount Hood Community College. We had a large group. We started out with field trip leaders doing some training with them. And then in the afternoon, we had a group of 25 people, mostly out of the beginner classes. And there weren't many mushrooms, but David is excellent at talking about the trees, the identification, the relationships between mushrooms and trees. And you're about to find out we found some stuff. All right, thank you, David. Okay, well, we're just getting rolling now, so Pat, you're up next. Let me cue your presentation. You'll be over here. Yes, you can use this. There you go. And give me just a second. Oh, yes, thank you. Okay, now let me put this on the collar.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Roger. Yeah, my name is Pat Okubara. I'm a member of the OMS Scholarship Committee. And this committee has been awarding graduate students throughout the years for their research. What I want to tell you about tonight, though, are two new funding opportunities for non-graduates, which is probably most of us, if not all of us, in this room. I'm supposed to go. Oh, yeah. Okay, sorry. Okay, and it's called. This first one is called the Maggie Rogers Memorial Grant, and it's intended for you folks, really, basically. So OMS members can apply, educators, undergraduates. They're not graduate students yet. They can apply. Basically, anyone interested in doing mycological science that's a member of the community. So your application could be on a large range of topics, including things like cultivation, the Microflora project, sequencing. In fact, I think we funded our first Maggie Rogers grant on a sequencing project. But there's many other mycology-related activities and pursuits that are of interest to the general mycological community that probably would be great to have to consider as a scholarship member. The only limitation is that you be a resident of Washington or Oregon. So how do you go about applying for a Maggie Rogers grant? Go to the OMS website, and there'll be on the top toolbar, there'll be a hyperlink called Get Involved. So select that one. And then there's a drop-down menu and select the OMS Scholarship Program, and you'll see the application form there. So it's an online process. You can get your form online, you can fill it out and submit it online. And the cool thing about these grants is that there's no deadline. So anytime you're ready to submit, you may have an idea now or later, just submit your application, and the committee will look at it as it comes to us. So are these funds considered for funding? The evaluation is really based on the proposal itself. What are you proposing to do? What is your question? And how are you planning to answer that question? So it's really the proposal and the scope of it. You need to provide enough information in these applications so that there's an idea of how much work it will be and what's your budget going to be like. So really, you want to provide enough information for the committee to be able to give a fair assessment of the application. And the other thing, I tend to do this, so this is an online form. I tend to skip over parts that I'll come back to, but you want to make sure you don't do that. You fill in every section of the application so that your application is complete. Yeah. The contact by email is Maggie Rogers Committee at wildmushrooms.org, or you can talk to any of the committee members. There's another new one that Rachel Ziert has implemented, and it's to award high school students and chaperones funds to attend microcamps. And this is still in progress. We don't have it online yet, but we hope to have it up in time for the fall camp. Okay, here we are. This is the old committee. We're still in the works here, and it looks like we're ordered from the tallest to the shortest, which is actually not intentional. But in fact, I thought I would show you our faces, because if you're new to the society, you may want to see these faces. Pam Beezing on the left. Well, Leah Benlin, Don Moore. Don is our chair. Rachel Ziert, who's here today. Yep, there she is. And this is me. We have one last committee member, and that's Jill Cohen. Jill, are you here tonight? Okay. Well, I don't know how tall Jill is. You might assume that she's a giant if these are huge, humongous, delicious-looking boletes, or maybe she's kind of average height if these are kind of supercharged, large boletes. Yes, okay. All right. Well, just to wrap up, I want to thank the board of directors, our webmasters, Justina and Linda, and also Kim Brown, who's in charge of the speakers. And thank you especially to Ethan Disbrow, who has given us some solid advice on the fiduciary and legal aspects of how to handle our money. So with that, I think I'll turn it over. Yeah.
Oh, I'm going to snag this off you.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you.
It's not often someone has Rachel beat. Hi. I just want to take a quick second and talk about Fall Show. So Fall Show is OMS's biggest event. It's huge for public outreach. It's really vital to the connection just with the community as a whole. And Kim Janik stepped down from her role of Fall Show coordinator. So we are currently without someone filling that role. And I just want to kind of make a plea to anybody who might have the time, the willingness to take that position on. You would not be going alone. You have a lot of people that are at ready. We have Freya, who coordinated 21 vendors last year, which was a fantastic turnout. I don't know if you all got to go and look at all of the wares that were displayed, but it was really amazing. You've got other support. Both Alice and I would be on your team. Neither of us have the capacity to take it on as a focal point. If you know anybody who might be interested or who has any experience in coordinating, larger events, something like a wedding, and is just willing to really around the season, especially speak to people on a weekly basis, Fall Show coordinating starts now. If we don't fill this position, we won't have a fall show. So it's really, really important that somebody is willing to step up. I'm hoping that somebody is inspired to do so. You can reach out. Is our new volunteer coordinator on the website? So we do have an overall volunteer coordinator, Jordan. You can reach out to her through our website. And again, you will have support, but we just need one focal person to take that on. So that's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
All right, so Alice Chang is here. She's going to introduce Dr. Michael Beug. While Alice is getting ready, we have some fancy new gear we're trying out today. Just so you know, if you've ever attended on YouTube, there were 39 people attending last time. I'll bet they're about equivalent number today, and we're just trying to improve their experience and yours too.
Okay, do I need this and that?
You can talk.
Okay. Oh, here. Okay, I'll do this. It's this double microphone, so I'm not sure. Can everybody hear me? Okay, so I'm Alice. I'm on the board and also the book coordinator. You guys usually see me at the front selling books for OMS. And I have the honor to introduce tonight's speaker. Michael Beug taught chemistry, mycology, and organic farming at Evergreen State College in Olympia, Washington for 32 years. One of his proudest accomplishments was a 2-year research project in the 1970s with colleague Steve Herman and 40 Evergreen students that was instrumental in the banning of DDT use in North America. Michael is active in the North American Mycological Association, NAMA, and Pacific Northwest Key Council, a group dedicated to writing macroscopic keys for the identification of fungi. In addition to his latest book, Mushrooms of Cascadia, an illustrated key to the fungi of the Pacific Northwest, he co-authored Ascomycetes fungi of North America in 2014, and that is also the topic of tonight's talk. His photographs and articles have appeared in numerous publications such as Mycovania, Journal of American Amateur Mycology, The Mycophile, and Fungi magazine. He's also created over 24 presentations about mushrooms, from poisonings, psilocybe as entheogens, morels, and many, many other topics, which you can find recorded online. In 2006, Michael received the NAMA Award for contributions to amateur mycology. And then in 2017, world-renowned mycologist Paul Stamets of Fungi Perfecti created the Mike Beug Scholarship in honor of the professor who helped shape Stamets' career. Most recently, I particularly appreciate his passion on the medicinal properties of mushrooms. He's freely sharing recipes and treatments that have worked for both himself and close friends to assist in the treatment of cancer and other ailments, and you can find those on his website, mushroomsofcascadia.com. He's been a dedicated supporter of OMS for decades, donating his time, his books, leading forays, and sharing his knowledge with our members and the general public. And on a personal note, I know Michael as a winemaker, sometimes wine snob, tender of fruit orchards, and an entertaining storyteller. So don't get him started on his mind-altering experience at Brighton Bush Hot Springs. Just say it. But most importantly, Michael is a funny, generous, empathetic human being who I aspire to be more like. Please help me welcome Michael Beug.
Well, it's tomorrow night that I'll be talking about Brighton Bush, but it's to the Evergreen College students because that's what they wanted to hear about. And I want to make sure that those of you are aware of the website, because it's not just the information I've been doing on medicinal mushrooms that's there, but also I have an alphabetized list of all my iNaturalist posts, and my wonderful web designer updates that once a month as I find and add new species. So my idea is to continually expand the book. And I have to extend apologies to everyone who is at MycoCamp, because there's only so many slides I have about Ascomycetes, and this is my third talk to those of you in 4 days, well, actually in 3 days, because we've talked about them Friday night, we talked about them Saturday, we talked about them Sunday morning, and here it is Monday night again. So I will get my little machine going here. So the season starts, obviously, with the early morels, Verpa bohemica and Verpa conica. And down here, the season's over. But I track the size of the leaves of the cottonwoods. And when the leaves are mouse ear sized, then it's time to go hunt Verpa in that area. And so there are areas in Gifford Pinchot and in Mount Hood that it's not time yet. And so this is something that, even though this is an early morel, we can be thinking about it right now. It was long considered poisonous because the premier North American mycologist, Dr. Alexander H. Smith, was allergic to it. So all of his books say that it's poisonous. But by the time I've been working with the NAMA database on mushroom poisonings for 10 years, and now it's over 50 years, I noticed that typically the number of poisonings from true morels was 10 to 20 times as high as that from Verpas. Of course, 10 to 20 times as many people eat morels than Verpas. So my conclusion was, it's no more and no less toxic than a morel. And for a long time, I didn't eat them because I wasn't all that super impressed with their flavor. And last year, working with Dr. Kathy Cripps from Montana and Dr. Heather Halen Adams, who's down in, I'm pretty sure she's in Nebraska. She's my replacement as the chair of the NAMA Toxicology Committee. We were writing the new cooking guidelines for the entire country for the, I think it's Food and Drug Administration that we were writing for, and working on new cooking techniques. And so I talked about, I had specific examples over the weekend, photographs of that. But first of all, when it says use the minimum amount of water or no water at all when you wash your mushrooms, okay. So as soon as you get back with your mushrooms, ignore that, throw them in a big pan of lightly salted water and let them soak for an hour or so. And that'll get rid of some of the critters that you don't want to find in there. But it also prepares them properly for cooking. And not only that, if it's a Verpa, or if it's a morel, or just about anything else except a Vermeria that has a lot of water in it naturally, once I slice the mushrooms, I put them in the pan, and I'm going to saute them, and I put in about 1.5 times as many mushrooms as will cover the bottom of the pan. And then I put in just enough water to cover the mushrooms. And then bring them to a boil, because Verpas and morels have a neurotoxin that's destroyed by heating for 5 minutes or so above 70 degrees Celsius. So I turn the heat to medium high and boil off the water. By the time I've boiled off the water, the mushrooms are fully cooked and safe to eat, but they're not that good yet. Then you salt them and you add a little bit of butter and olive oil, and you continue cooking until they're lightly browned, not heavily brown, crispy, but lightly brown. And that causes a protein in the mushroom to combine with a sugar in the mushroom and make a highly beneficial and very delicious high umami flavor. And this year, for the first time, I cooked Verpas that way. And A, it toughens them up, and B, they were as good as or better than any morel I've ever cooked. So I just wanted to pass that on, because this is a mushroom that I ate and enjoyed for the first time, and I've been doing this since 1968, and this was the first year, and it was that difference in cooking technique that made all the difference. And then The next thing you're going to find as the season progresses is going to be this Morchella importuna, which is also known as the landscape morel. Now, just be aware that there are many different mushrooms that will grow in a landscape bed, many different morels even. There's at least 4 species, but this is the main one and is very distinctive because what it has compared to all of the other black morels, and this is a black morel. Now, black morels can be blonde. It means that in age, the ridges turn black, unless it's Morchella importuna, and then that's why Michael Kuo called that one frustrata. We'll get to that one. But it has many more vertical ridges and very straight ones with little short laterals. So I call that sort of like the ladder morel, and it's very distinctive. So you can easily identify Morchella importuna. But from my beginning, and I ate morels first in 1968, and prior to that, I didn't like any mushroom, and especially the thing you buy in the store. But this is probably the least tasty of them all. There's a lot of better ones. So if you haven't ever experienced it, and in addition to growing in landscapes, this will grow in areas that have been clear cut. Now, I don't like to pick in clear cuts because clear cuts have often been sprayed with herbicides. In fact, usually. I worry about that a lot more than picking in a burn where you worry about fire retardants, but they only use fire retardants around the edge where they're trying to protect something very valuable. The rest of the burn area is water. And I watched that big mine fire on Mount Adams last year, and it was just air tanker after air tanker after air tanker dropping water. So I don't worry about harvesting mushrooms in burns in terms of, and also when they're using fire retardants, they dye them pink. So if the soil is pink, you want to avoid it. But I recommend not picking in clear cuts at all. A lot of people do it, or if you know the person who's done the clear cut and you know they haven't sprayed, that's fine. But this is the main mushroom you find in clear cuts as well. This, believe it or not, is a mushroom that in Michael Kuo's 10-year study of morels that ended, I think it was published in 2012. Nobody turned this in. This is far and away the most abundant and widely distributed and long season black morel. And in general, all the black morels that we have on the West Coast are different than the black morels we have on the East Coast, except this one. And all the black morels we have in North America are different than all the black morels that we have in Europe, in Northern Asia, except this one. And so Andrus Wojtek from Newfoundland and I named this mushroom when this name had been lost and we did not know what norvegiensis is. We named it Morchella Io-Hespera, Eos for the goddess of the sunrise, Hespera for the Hesperides, the sprites of the sunset, because he turned his collection of morels into the same DNA guy as I did, the same week, in about just about 5 years ago. And we suspected it could be norvegiensis, so he went and found the guy and he went collecting with the guy who collected norvegiensis. That guy didn't know anything about mushrooms. He just found some morels in a place, sent it to a French pharmacist, and the French pharmacist published it and slapped a name on it without doing any of the work you're supposed to do before publishing a name. But the rule is, first come, first served, and that name sticks, good, bad, or indifferent. And so, but I'm going to go back for a minute. When does this fruit, you might be curious about, at sea level, starts in late March. What do you find it under? It's under conifers, it's under hardwoods, it's under your fruit trees, it's in your parking strip. And when do you quit finding it? Middle of July. And at about 3,500 to 4,000 feet in elevation, So it's this extremely long season, extremely distinctive, and how that mushroom escaped, because people all over the United States were sending in their samples to Michael Couot, and many of us were also sending in samples to to the French, and I sent my samples to both places. And yet this got missed completely. I didn't discover it until 2 years after these mushrooms were all formally named. And so we had to name what we found, and then we lost that name. Now, this is a really important morel to know, because it grows in the same place every year, often for 5. Now, it can skip a year, but it can grow in the same place for 20 years. So once you find a patch, you can be well rewarded as long as there's enough rain for it to fruit. And we found a fair amount of this at the camp at Subtle Lake, and it's been there for the 30 years I've been collecting there. And the distinctive feature is it grows in a clump. And that double basket I'm sitting with over there, one day I was just above Glenwood, probably 2 miles, maybe 3 miles outside of Glenwood, and I had noticed that this commercial picker that I know very well had his truck hidden right in there. I mean, he just drove in. And normally I don't know where he's picking. And I knew he wasn't picking in that clear cut, because it's 5 years old and everyone knows there's no mushrooms there. So I called him up that night and I said, "What were you doing there?" Well, I said, "We picked 800 pounds of morels, the two of us. You ought to get up there tomorrow." So I got 3 friends who'd never gone mushrooming, and we put 4 5-gallon buckets in the back of my car, and we drove up to where I had seen his rig parked. And that's 1 hour. That was my share of 1 hour. The 4 of us each got that amount in an area of about 40 acres that had produced 800 pounds the day before. I made 2 more trips over the next 2 weeks, and by then we were really close to Glenwood. They'd figured out what was going on, and so on the last trip, the 4 of us got a mere 5 gallons of morels. So that's why this is an incredibly important mushroom to know. And it's always in color going to be gray, green, tan, or burgundy, reliably. i.e. the color is worthless. But the fact that it grows in clusters isn't worthless. And this is another mushroom that that can grow in clusters, but generally smaller ones, but also is very reliable. Just like that incredible lady, Maggie Rogers, who you heard about earlier this evening. And late in her life, it was my privilege to take her to New Mexico, to take her to California, to take her wherever she needed to go, that she had someone to make sure she got back again when her mind was starting to go. She was an incredible librarian and one of the most beautiful, wonderful members of the OMS. And I'm so glad to hear about this committee that you have. And that's Maggie. And she was just a lovely, lovely lady. And so she's holding a mushroom that Michael Couot called Morchella frustrata, because it looks like an Americana, what we call a blonde morel, in color, but it's shaped like a black morel. But the ridges don't blacken in age. Here's an older one here. You can see they stay light colored, but the whole mushroom just turns a little more amber. But Morchella snyderi and Morchella importuna are 2 of the most delicious of all morels. And if you're lucky and find a good patch, you can find 100 or 200, sometimes in an area about the size of this part of the room, not including that part. And so it can be tremendously prolific. It's so delicious. It's very distinctive. And you know, if it looks like a hollow pine cone, it's a morel. Now, a couple of weeks ago, Noah Siegel posted a morel cut in half in the picture on Facebook. I'm sorry. Only he had cut a ponderosa pine cone in half, and was complaining that it was a little tough to cook. So I recommended that he use a pressure cooker in the future to cook that particular mushroom. And if you're hunting under hardwoods, that's Morchella brunea. And this photo on the far right, we had been walking around that area for probably 15 minutes before we realized there were morels there. And it was a huge area to explore. There were 6 trees. And once we looked close in the bushes, we filled that entire bag in about another 10 minutes. And my son married a Dutch woman, and her parents were visiting from the Netherlands, and this is my youngest son. And those of you who have the new book, the picture he's now an adult with twins. So we were out hunting in this spot, and this is a turnout that everyone parks for a viewpoint. It's a big turnout. So we're talking probably it gets visited by 30 or so people a day. And to be able to pull in there and haul out that many morels. And so that's another hint of the story of what's involved in picking morels. When you see one, get down on your hands and knees, or even as low as you can to the ground, and make a slow 360-degree circle. Because I can remember as we were leaving on Sunday from Settle Camp, there's a walkway you walk in to enter the building where the mushroom display was. I walked out there, and these 2 people I had been guiding the previous day were picking morels. And from the walkway, I said, well, over there's another one, and there's another one. I swear, were not there the day before, because I had hunted that patch, that exact spot the day before. And so that's the other thing about it. We had a little light rain during the night. And but the other joke is you hike up the trail and you don't find morel 1. You turn around and you hike back out and you find 40. And so we always say, well, they just grow real fast. Well, they grow real slow. And when I find morels like on my own vineyard or orchard area, and I can leave them alone, I know nobody's going to touch them. They might be 3 or 4 inches tall when I first find them. And if I come back in 10 days and the weather's been good, they'll be 10 inches tall. And so a lot of people swear morels don't grow once they come up. Well, they don't grow because usually somebody gets them before you get a chance to get back. But if you can let them grow, and I occasionally see a mushroom, and look at the size of these beggars. That's my Swiss Army knife. They didn't start out that size. This same species, quite a few of them, showed up in the camp. And the biggest ones were about 1.5 inches, 2 inches tall, and maybe 3/8 of an inch wide. They didn't look like this at all, but there's exactly the same species. So you get the right condition and enough time. This is the half-free morel, and this is Morchella populophylla on the left and the top, right. Punctatipes is the eastern half-free morel, but supposedly that thing on the top right and the thing on the left are exactly the same species. But that's according to ITS DNA, and I've run both of them. I've run multiple collections of both things. They both turn out identical. So clearly, all this DNA work we're doing doesn't always tell all the story, because the texture is very different. I was willing to swear that the small upper right, Morchella populophylla, which 2 years ago when it was abundant on Facebook, they were calling that one the little prick. And I was sure that was just some weird kind of a verpa that wasn't completely skirt-like from the top, because it has a verpa texture, but it doesn't have the cottony stuff inside. It's completely hollow, but it's very fragile. It breaks apart. This is not at all, the one on the left is not at all fragile and doesn't break apart. They're both delicious, and then we get into the burn morels. And the thing to say about the burn morels, with one exception, the gray morel, you can't tell them apart except by DNA. And at this point, we now know that there's 5 species. There was 3, and then there was 4. Now we're up to 5. And all of the ones in this picture are DNA confirmed. They're actually part of the publication in France of Morchella eximia, which was an old species, a name that had been lost, but they were able to match the DNA of the stuff that I sent from white salmon from a fire that I was afraid was going to burn my house down, but it went the other way, fortunately. So I sent these in, and look how different they are. They're all the same species. But in general, these morels, all of them come up quite light and get darker soon after they come out. And so that's the other thing you're going to find. So color is somewhat variable. And this one is the best tasting of all morels by far. And at noon today, before I packed up to come up here today, and I saw a post of this mushroom already turning up in, I think it was right on the Washington order, right nearby. So this is already starting to fruit. Normally, this doesn't start to fruit until July, and it will fruit, if there's enough moisture, until snowfall. And it will also fruit in a burn up to 4 or 5 years after the burn. And once in a while, you'll even find it when there hasn't been a burn at all. So this is a really neat mushroom to know. It starts out, and it's in that upper corner there, all covered with these little short hairs. They're on the stipe, they're all over the surface. Now, they don't go away, but the mushroom grows, but the hairs don't. So in an old mushroom, and these are old ones, you don't see all that gray anymore. But they're delicious and edible at all of the stages. They keep longer. They're meatier than your average morel. This is the #1 best morel of all. And it's one that most people are still pretty much unaware of, especially the fact that it can be in the burn 2 or 3 or 4 years after everyone's been beating that burn to death. I mean, I remember going up to a burn near White Pass, and we walked all day and we didn't see mushroom 1. I got back to Evergreen and my students all had filled their 5-gallon buckets. So I went the next week with my teaching partner, and we brought our mountain bikes, and we just biked as far and as fast as we could. And even then we had to walk another half an hour into the burn. But once we passed where people could get on foot from the road, it was all we could carry out within an hour. I mean, it's just an obscene quantity. And then the last year that I taught the Fungal Kingdom program, my retirement year, was the spring of 2001. And we were up in the Okanagan of Washington. And one of the students had been working for the Forest Service, and he had a Forest Service master key with him and unlocked the Forest Service gate. Now, I didn't go in that van. I took a different van, but 2 vans went in, and so that night we had 2 vanfuls of morels. I mean, just a mountain of them. And my group found like 10 morels. And I talked to that particular student at our 20-year reunion a couple of years ago, he's still got that key. Okay, now this is a really easy mushroom to find because it's under cottonwoods. Just go out to the island down here and look under the cottonwoods. Except that it took me, let's see, I started mushrooming in 1968. I found my first one of these in 2021. But the lower part of the Lewis River, the lower part of the Columbia River, all over the place. When the lilacs are in bloom, these are coming up. So again, I use a key, a vegetational key. When I'm after the morels in the woods, it's when the trilliums are starting to go from white to pinkish as they get a little older, or when the Calypso bulbosa orchids are blooming. But like yesterday, I found a cluster right by camp of a beautiful clump of 12 Calypso bulbosa orchids, but a grand total of 0 nearby morels. But it just means they could be there. But this is pretty much a look-alike, same flavor, but this is Morchella prava. So we actually have 3 Morchella americana type things, and the third one is Morchella vulgaris, which is only supposed to be in Europe, but I found it, a friend of mine found it in her backyard in white salmon, and we had it sequenced. And I think it's also been found around the Great Lakes, although that is not as well confirmed. So these are all delicious. And the difference between these blonde morels, which aren't necessarily blonde, but at maturity, the ridges stay blonde, but they can be very black. But notice the ridges are very random. They're not nice and linear. So the black morels have linear ridges, and the blonde morels have ridges that wander all around. Now, this is a really neat looking morel, rather different than most. That's a typical morel spore shown in the image. And look how identical it always is. Easy to tell them apart by the fact that they all smell like bleach. And other than that, you can just forget about figuring out what you have if it didn't smell like bleach. Because I thought we had 5 species of Dysiotis venosa 2 years ago before I collected all the different species and had them all sequenced. And there was no difference. And so these things that I thought this is 3 different ones, they're all identical in terms of DNA. But what they had in common was that odor of bleach, where the little Dysina type ones don't have that odor of bleach. And also, if you take a spore print, that's exactly what a morel spore would look like. Same size, same shape. If you have a scanning electron microscope, you can tell the difference, but not with any normal microscope. They all look identical in spore-wise. Now, this is something that Dysiotis venosa could be these colors as well, but this does not have that bleach odor, and the top of the cap doesn't tend to be wrinkled. The Dysiotis species are quite wrinkled to at least a little bit wrinkled all of the time. And so, but this one used to be called Gyrometra melaleucoides, and it looks a lot like a mushroom that used to be called Dysina, and is once again called Dysina. But this has a tiny little spore, where a Dysina has a great big spore. It's twice as long with 2 big oil drops rather than small. But without doing a spore print, I can't tell this from a true Dysina. And here is what a true Dysina looks like. And the spores on the true Dysina, if you look close, you see a little tiny point at both ends of the spores. And so that's Dysina. And if it has a little stipe, it's Dysina mcnidii. If there's no stipe, no stem at all, then it's Dysina ancillus, or if you're in Europe, it'll be Dysina perlata, a lookalike. And you can eat this if you want. Boring. But it's not going to poison you. But one you should not eat is this one, and it looks so much like the Dicina that you're going to mistake it. And for that reason, I don't eat the Dicinas or the Pseudodicinas, even though technically those are safe. This one has gyrometrin. Now, all of the gyrometer species have a neurotoxin, but this one has a special neurotoxin that breaks down to produce a volatile monomethylhydrazine. And that is in high doses, it can be lethal directly, but in low doses, it can later in life induce cancer and or ALS. So I have a strong recommendation not to eat anything that looks like this. And then this little one up here is very small compared to the others. It only gets about the size of a silver dollar, where the others get, they'll be as big as they'll be wider than a dollar bill, so it's a much bigger mushroom. And I always called the little one, and it always looked kind of peachy colored, and so I called it my little peach. And so it took me 10 years to get someone to agree to run the DNA for it, and it was unique. And Alden Dirks, the guy that just caused all this trouble with the gyrometry species and got everyone up in arms, he decided we should name it Pezizales, and Persicula, and Persicula is Latin for little peach. So he took my name and just Latinized it. And the reason it has the name Persicula, or Pezizales, see how the end of it is kind of got a fishtail shape to the end, both ends of the spores? And that's where the pissy comes from. So even though people get annoyed at the Latin, you can often, if you think about it a little bit, you can tell a lot about the mushroom just from the Latin name. And the other reason I like the Latin names, and a lot of people don't, is if I get my Japanese mushroom books out, the descriptions are all in Latin. The names are all in Latin. That's the global language. So if we go and invent common names, which iNaturalist is now doing, it's only good for bloody North Americans, and it's not good for the rest of the world. That annoys me. Just buck up. And also, we've got Google nowadays. Just Google it and see what the name means. And you'll have a lot of fun using the Latin when you do that. Now, Malblancomyces montanus is what I'm sure all of you learned as Gyrometra montana. And even when I was beginning, this was Gyrometra montana. And it has an interesting spore that is it's got a knob on each end. It's not pointed. It's not boat-shaped. It's just a plain knob. So any Gyrometra-like thing that gives a spore print with a knob on the end is going to be in this genus. So this genus is for everything that has that shape of a spore. So this is Malblancomyces. Now, the important thing about it, yes, it has a neurotoxin, but it's a similar kind of neurotoxin to the one in morels. All you have to do is cook it just like I described cooking the verpa. And it's much more delicious that way than if you cook it your usual way, because I've never liked it until I cooked it right, the new way. And B, you've destroyed that neurotoxin, and you can safely destroy the neurotoxin in everything except something that has gyrometrin in it, which you cannot safely destroy the neurotoxin. You can think you've done it, and this tends to grow right on the edge of melting snowbanks, but it will persist as much as a month after the snow is melted. But you'll first find it. Sometimes there'll be snow all around it. There'll just be enough melted. In fact, when these mushrooms are actively growing, they produce metabolic heat. The temperature can be well below freezing, and the fungus is not. It's heating up the ground, and it actually melts the snow around it faster than the surrounding areas. This is what you do not want to eat. And don't listen to people that say you can safely detoxify it. Yeah, maybe. But you better, even if you're cooking it outside, you better be very careful to make absolutely certain you don't inhale any vapors. And I have cooked it years ago when we thought that the Western mushrooms had very little gyrometrin and were safe. And it was the Eastern ones, like back in Michigan, and not true. We've now proved that conclusively. Alden has run the gyrometrin levels for our Western species, as well as the Midwestern, and as well as the European species. We've done them all. And some of our specimens are very low, but some of them are very high. But I don't even want to mess with a low amount of gyrometrin. So, and how do we distinguish this from the Malblancomyces montana? Look at that stipe. How it's as wide as the cap, and when you cut it open, it's all twisted and gnarly inside. And we look at this one, and you cut it open, and you can see it most clearly in this picture over here. It's hollow. It's basically hollow. It's not that twisted. And the stipe can be a little bit wide. It's either round or flattened, but it's never virtually the same width as the cap. It can also grow close to snow, but it usually comes later. And it can be almost white in color, and it can be almost black. And the color is unreliable. The size is unreliable. We have two different species. I know of no way other than DNA to tell them apart. Although, if you follow the description, when they were published, because the person who published the two species that we have did it from a small collection of each one, their description is not representative of what the mushroom can actually look like. So these are all they're indistinguishable from Esculenta. And we have Splendida and Venenata as our two species. But I like to say Gyrometra esculenta group, and that covers all of the bases. So when I want to put a name on it. And now if you look at those spores compared to the ones I've been showing. As soon as you take a spore print, very distinctively, much smaller and no ornamentation. And this is the Paragyrometra. And this has got an intermediate size spore, but very distinctive with those two bubbles, but no ornamentation on either end. And for a long time, these were thought to contain gyrometrin. They do not. We've now confirmed that in the last couple of years. The reason it's hard is gyrometrin is very volatile, and it's a very difficult thing to analyze and to analyze accurately. But we've now done it very carefully. These are safe to eat, but would I eat them? They're not worth it. You can do it when you're determined. Helvella acidabulum, all of the helvellas and some of the similar things like Distingia, which used to be a helvella, have this very distinctive spore. The spore is almost identical in all the various helvellas. And acidabulum is neat because it's got all the veins on the underside. And Distingia crassitunicata I like because normally you just see that black cup. You don't see that rather pretty little white stipe to the goblet. And I like goblet. Maybe it makes me think of drinking wine or something. And by the way, that business about don't drink wine when you eat your morels, well, I'm about 1,000 people into the experiment. I always serve wine if it's allowed. And nobody's gotten sick. The difference is I cook my bloody morels first rather than slightly wave them over the pan and then call them cooked. You can die that way, and people have. Helvella dryophylla is named because it's typically under oaks. It's a hardwood species. except when it's not. So how do you distinguish it from Helvella vespertina, which used to be called lacunosa? Well, Helvella vespertina grows in the fall, not in the spring, except when it doesn't. But Helvella vespertina always has a long stipe, and Helvella dryophila always has a short stipe. And so you can tell them that way. And the other neat thing about it is if you cut it in half from top to bottom, and I'm talking about dryophila, it almost looks like it was made out of a single sheet of mushroom material where you just sort of bunch it up at the bottom, kind of like doing an origami, and fold the top over, where you can't do that with Helvella vespertina. So I don't just look at mushrooms, by the way, when I'm identifying them. I taste them, you spit them out, I smell them, I break them. I want to know what they feel like. I want to know what they look like inside. I want to know how they cut apart. And here's some of these they're all edible. They're small. Why bother? And but as long as they're well cooked, you could eat them. But I'm just fascinated by the Ascomycetes. And by the way, I wrote Ascomycete fungi from Northern, and I'm the guy who wrote the book. The other two authors are the people that had the contacts, and we got the contract. And they always find a sucker to be the third author to write the book, and then they put their name on it. So just FYI on that one. And what I did to write the Ascomycete book is I wrote to every photographer in North America who does good photography and said, send me everything you've got if you want to have me consider it for the book. And everybody in the country wanted an ASCO book. There's a lot of field guides out there, but there isn't anything like Ascomycete fungi of North America. Now, if you want a copy now, they're only $1,000. So it's because they went out of print, because it took 10 years to sell 3,000 copies. And when they asked me a year ago if I wanted to reissue it, they didn't want to reissue it. They wanted to know if I wanted to redo it and self-publish it. I said, you got to be kidding. But what I did is I updated all that information for the Northwest in Mushrooms of Cascadia. So for our region, it's as complete as you can get. And somebody brought in what was probably Pezizales varia, or either that or Pezizales vesiculosa today. Pezizales are boring and hard to identify. But what you do is say, oh, look at that beautiful Pezizales, and then you go on. Same thing you do with Cortinarius, and oh, look at that Cortinarius, and then you hope nobody says anything more. The neat thing is the Daleomyces bicolor. I was going up to the spring where I get the water that waters my orchard. It's all gravity fed. And here this thing was, this brilliantly colored mushroom, and I'd never seen anything like it. So I sent it to the Pezizales expert in Germany, and he had just named it, and he thought it was only found in Germany. And this is the only collection I know of from North America. But it's a beautiful little thing, and I've only found it that one time. So the other thing I've learned, when I see a mushroom, I photograph it or collect it, because if I think I'm going to find it again, usually I don't, unless it's really common. And here's Caliscypha fulgens. Notice the word group. So one of Leah's challenges in the near future is going to be to sequence the Caliscypha fulgens that we collected. It wasn't me, whoever collected it up at Subtle Lake over the weekend, because it was even brighter red than the image by Steve Trudell, and that also came from Subtle Lake, where Caliscypha fulgens is supposed to look like the thing in the center. We've got at least 3 species. And this is what we're finding all the time. Life is a lot more complicated. The more we know, the more we need to know. And I spend a lot of time at Subtle Lake area wandering around along creeks and springs, looking for things growing in the water. And 3 of these are things growing in the water. And one, the Sarabiella rainana, is a special thing that tends to grow up by snowbanks, but it turns out it also grows, I found out, by Alsea Falls. And the neat thing about it is, in this one, this is a perennial, and every year there'll be more cups. So as it gets older and older and older, you get more and more cups. And I think it's just beautiful. I've looked for it my whole career. I mean, ever since I wrote the Ascomycetes fungi book, anyway, I've never found it again. This one, the Vibressia truncorum, is different than the Vibressia truncorum that Leah finds. So I'm looking. Hers doesn't have the dots on the stem. I've only seen this once in my life, so I'm trying to find it again. I'm hoping that we'll find hers again, the one without the dots, so we can compare the DNA. Because when I photographed this, I was still more of an amateur. I wasn't good at keeping a voucher and doing all that stuff, so I didn't have anything to do with the DNA. And but Vibressia truncorum grows in rapidly flowing water on sticks. And so we had plenty of opportunity, and every time I'm around flowing water in the mountains, I'm looking for this. And every time I'm around pools of sort of swampy pools, but stay with water year round, and I found a beautiful patch of that, like a half a mile up the Round Lake Road. There was this big strip of aspens, and I walked upriver both yesterday and the day before yesterday, and there must have been 50 little tiny springs, each producing a little marshy area or a pond, beautiful clear water. So I looked and looked for Mitrula elegans. I found it once. They're very small. They're maybe an inch tall, and they're called swamp beacons. And I just find them fascinating. And now Sclerotinia sulcata, I used that image that Noah provided for me on the cover of the Ascomycetes book because it's just so beautiful. But there wasn't, it's also associated with a specific herb that was not present at Subtle Lake. So I wasn't looking for that. I'm always looking for it. And I found a lot of it up at White Pass last year, and I actually found the mushroom itself, but it's false hellebore, and there was a plant, a false hellebore plant, the exact plant I'd looked at 12 years ago, and had photographed it, but my photographs didn't come out. And so when I was there a year ago, May, I went back and I spotted the exact plant, and I looked, there's nothing there. And then we did our searching, and we were coming back, and we took one more look, and there was about 20 of them. So some of these things you've got to really open your eyes to get to see. And this is a single elk dropping right here. So that gives you a sense of the magnification. And these are incredibly beautiful under a microscope, but even fascinating. But there was only 9 species on that elk dropping, so it's kind of boring overall. We spent the whole night on it at a key council meeting, finding more, and the more we looked, those little white dots turned out to be fungi. There were actually some little tiny coprinus type things on there. It's just stunning. Pseudombrophylla cervaria normally grows on deer droppings, and that's the cervina part of the name. That's obviously a cow flop. And the one below it is one of my very favorite mushrooms, Bisonestria cartilaginea. That thing was about a foot long and 4 inches wide, and all covered. There's a subiculum, that more pale stuff, sort of like a membrane, and all these orange dots are growing out of the membrane. You pick that up and turn it over, and it's solid pica dung underneath, because those little rabbits of the mountains all defecate in the same place under the snow all winter long. And so the following spring, and I've never found this particular thing myself, but I was in McCall, Idaho at a foray like your summer camp, and somebody brought it in, so I just took my chance and photographed it. Same with the Pseudombrophylla. That was from the same foray in McCall, Idaho. I was staying with Orson Miller in Orson and Hope's home, and then doing what I'm doing here. It really felt funny to be speaking and having Orson Miller sit in the audience, for those of you who know who Orson is. Intimidating, I think, would have been a better word. And then here's another cow flop, and one of these little tiny things that they're pretty and they're interesting. So a lot of insane people like me will take these things home and keep them wet and let them, but I don't go quite to that extreme. But if I see one that's fruiting, then I'll photograph it. And I love some of these beautiful things, like the Plectanias that have the gold rim around them. Plectania milleri. This was actually photographed quite close to Orson Miller's home in McCall, Idaho, when he retired from the University of Virginia. But it's got a scalloped edge to it. But there's actually two different species. And so these little black things are hard to find. And the Donadelia nigrella has a nice long stem, so it's another beautiful goblet mushroom. And I just love the goblet-shaped mushrooms. And then there's the jelly-like ones. And like I say, some of you have heard all this story before. I've long wanted to find Neocudoniella radicella. It grows in sphagnum bogs. You know, there's some beautiful sphagnum bogs out on the Oregon coast, and I haven't been in them, but it grows on spruce rootlets. Now, when I did find this mushroom, my photographs didn't turn out, but we were walking on a fen in Wisconsin, just south of the Great Lakes. Now, this was a thing, it was maybe twice the diameter of this room, but it's a round thing. And the lake is 35 feet deep. But there was a log that reached from the shore out onto the sphagnum. So we took our boots off and our socks off, and there was just three of us, a real mycologist and myself and a naturalist who happens to work at the nature center there. And everyone else was on a foray, and I was playing hooky because I wanted a chance. And we walked out on that fen, and you're floating. You're walking on 35 feet of water, you know, and you only sink maybe a couple, 3 inches in, and you can get it waving a bit as you walk. But it was kind of hard to photograph because you couldn't get down on your hands and knees and try and take a picture. And so I didn't get good pictures. But it grows on the spruce root tips, and the root tips come right to the surface in order to exchange to have oxygen because of the growth on the sphagnum. And then the others are just plain old jelly fungi. But these are Ascomycete jellies, where most of the jelly fungi you find are Pezizales jellies. And this is the latest surprise. All my life there's been one Sarcosphaera coronaria. And just a few weeks ago, a new paper came out. Sarcosphaera coronaria is found in Europe, but not in North America. And there's a second Sarcosphaera species also found in Europe that used to be considered a synonym of coronaria, but it's distinct. So now Europe has 2, but it turns out we have 10. And all of ours need new names. And 2 of our most common ones here already have names. And both of them were found at camp this weekend. Sarcosphaera pacifica does not have a stipe. And they're called tulip cups. They start out hollow, underground, and then they open like a tulip. And as the spores mature, they turn violet. The color develops slowly. But if it has a stem, a stipe, that's Sarcosphaera montana. And now when I wrote Ascomycetes fungi of North America, I said this thing may or may not have a stipe. No other book had mentioned a stipe. It's because I find this thing near my house. So I knew I was finding a stipe, and I only had one name. So I applied the name to everything, but I mentioned it in the description that sometimes it's got a stipe. Well, no, it's a separate species if it has a stipe. And it has a lovely taste of pink erasers on the pencil, at least according to Orson Miller. Now, I haven't eaten it myself because it's a hyperaccumulator of arsenic. Now, some arsenic is an essential micronutrient, pure arsenic in small amounts, but it's toxic in larger amounts. But these tend to have organoarsenicals in them. But any one species varies in its toxicity because at different times and in different conditions, it'll have different organoarsenic compounds. Some of them are not very toxic at all, and some of them are highly toxic. Don't eat them, any of them. But they sure are beautiful. And the last time I was out in Trout Lake, my total score was 0 morels, 0 spring kings, and 150 of these things. So, Hydnotria varia, yes. What? 5 minutes. Oh, 5 minutes. Well, I'm at the end, so we're doing good. I was trying to stretch it so I didn't, so I used up all my time. Hydnotria variformis is right in the middle of Gyrometra. Had it not fallen genetically right in the middle of Gyrometra, we wouldn't have had all these name changes. But the international community of mycologists wanted to preserve Hydnotria for these ones that grow underground. So this is an underground Gyrometra, and this the Hydnotria species. And other things that grow underground are Geopora cooperi, which is really delicious. You just cut off that outer crust and saute it up sort of like it was a morel, and they grow in Burns and other places. And then there's the Elaphomyces. We've probably got 100 species of Elaphomyces, but they have a thick rind and that sort of marble black interior. And sometimes they get parasitized by an Elaphocordyceps. And so that's what we see in this image. And then, of course, there's the true truffles. Now, if it smells delicious, it's going to be delicious because it's the smell you're after. They don't have a lot of flavor. If it doesn't smell and you get these things immature, they're worthless, disinteresting. So only go after truffles with a dog who can smell it, or your wife, because it's a male sex pheromone that attracts people, and some women can actually detect truffles by their smell and hunt truffles that way. But not all truffles, not all tubers, and not all truffles are in the genus tuber, but my favorite ones are in the genus tuber. But tuber candidum is not very good. Tuber luomeae is vile. But Oregonensis and gibbosum, I love. My 2 boys hate. My wife. So it's a love-hate mushroom. But on an OMS foray about 14 years ago, it cost us $1,200. We had 2 dogs. We got 1 pound of truffles. From that 1 pound of truffles, each person got 2 ounces because there were 8 of us. So I had 2-gallon jars. I put 1 ounce in each jar, and then I filled the rest of the jar with things like butter, raw eggs, whole avocados, uncut, cheese. You leave it 2 days, take all that out, change the towel that the truffles are in, do that again 2 more days, and do that a 3rd time. So I wound up with 6 gallons of truffled cheeses, truffled butter, truffled avocados, truffled eggs. That's why they're expensive, but look what we got. And then we were able to eat the truffles. And it was 2 years before I finished all the truffled products from that one day out. Well, we didn't pig out on them regular. They were a special treat. And here is what that looks like when you're out doing that. This is the OMS group, and you'll recognize some of the participants. And Don Moore paid my way, and then I wrote an article for Fungi magazine about it. But that was one of the really, really special days of my life, is going out with that crew. End of January, it was about 70 degrees. We're down by Eugene. We've got 2 truffle dogs. They've got lights on their back and bells because the woods are so dense. They're about 30 years old, and old Christmas tree orchards, or even current Christmas tree farms, can be really good for this mushroom. And that's it. So I'll get that out of the way. I think we have a little time for questions, right? Okay. I'm just going to close the distraction down here. There we go. Yes.
I have a question that I've heard a lot of people talk about, and I don't know if it's true or not, regarding truffles. I kicked up a truffle one day. I'm like, oh my gosh, it's such a truffle, and was confirmed it was an organ, but it didn't have a smell. It wasn't ripe yet. And somebody after I shared it, somebody said, should have wrapped it in a moist paper towel and then put it in a glass jar for a couple days. It'll ripen.
Yeah, more likely to mold. That's what it's done every time I've tried that.
I have one other question.
Yeah.
This is a strange one. I actually have a picture somewhere. We came across, there were 2 mushrooms very close to each other, that far apart. One was the Yoda, the yellow one.
Yeah.
And near it was one that, it was rubbery top, like I don't know these mushrooms very well, but it was brown and rubbery top, and then it had a mushroom spike, but they didn't look like they would be together. And somebody said, oh, you should have brought it in, and I'd just thrown it out. And they said, I've never heard of this one before.
Well, there are stipitate jelly fungi. That's probably what you found. Okay. And yeah.
Okay.
About the microscope, I've tried to look at spores before as a novice, trying to determine through the microscope what the spores look like. What type of magnification are you using with your microscope, and how do you prepare your slides?
Well, that's, if it is an Ascomycete, you have to use either water, you must not use KOH, and you must not use Meltzers. Now, if it's a Basidiomycete, you want KOH and you want Meltzers. So it depends on whether you're looking at an Asca or a Basidio. And a spore print has to be naturally dropped. And then you generally need to have an oil immersion capability, so you're at 1000x. Now, some of the Ascomycetes, you can get a good look at the spores at 400x, which is called high dry. But below 400x, no, can't do it. Okay.
Well, if there are no more questions, thank you, Michael. Presentation.